Good morning, BookTube. It's Sunday morning, and let's get to the Q&A for 200 subscribers. This is the third attempt at making it. I keep may not be a good idea to make videos in the morning. I a lot of times get sneezing fits. But yeah, so let's get to it. Jason at Byways in Bookland has a few questions. First of all, Jason says, congrats, Sean. Thank you very much, Jason. First question is, what was your favorite dig and what was your favorite object / feature uncovered? My favorite dig, I would say, is the one I was on in 1991 as a field school in Jordan at Tel Jawa, an Iron Age site just outside of modern-day Amman. It basically was grazing area, sort of, for goats for a local farmer. Now, apparently, I think it's been bulldozed and have all new houses on it, which is a shame because it in no way was ever being close to being fully excavated. But the square that I was running was part of a storage area, but I found it was a spout of a jug of some sort, probably for wine or could have been for oil, but I don't know what the actual final conclusion was for that, but the spout was in the shape of a lion, and the hole obviously was the lion's mouth, so it was a lion's face was the end of the spout, and I thought that was really, really cool. Other features, nothing spectacular. We found the plastered floor, and found some the stone sort of foundation types for the entranceway. That was a solid feature. For there anyway. Other places, like other digs in Canada, I was on near Aurelia. Pardon me. It was a village, and it was going to be a subdivision. They were going to build houses on there, and I was asked to come in and just do test 2 meter by 2 meter. Pardon me. Test squares. Just identify anything else. And there was actually an ossuary that was there, and at some point, the farmer, somebody knew about it, so they took a backhoe to it. If you're not familiar with what an ossuary is, it's a place where native North Americans would reinter their dead after the fleshy bits are gone, and it would be a mass sort of whole burial. So they didn't want this around, so they just sort of took a backhoe to it. Nice. Anyway, because it was just all destroyed, this area, but because I was able to locate the edge of it, I do apologize. I was able to identify the edge of it, so we were able to actually see where it was, but because it was all broken up, there were no bits of bones bigger than, that size, basically. They were just all destroyed. But that was kind of cool because it was able to identify what had happened with that, and how, and basically when. But anyway, that was sort of a feature. And also another place that I thought was great was when I went to Egypt before I was incarcerated in the local jail in Cairo. I spent a day on an excavation outside of Cairo. Didn't find anything. I poked around a bit, but it's cool because I thought, I've excavated in Egypt, in quotation marks. Jason goes on to ask, do you annotate books or put any ownership marks on them? Not really, no. I used to, in university or before that, I used to make some notes in pencil in a book, but I stopped doing that shortly after I started. I do have a design for a book plate in mind for myself. I just need somebody to design it. Whether I'll wind up using it is another question. I'm just not sure if I can bring myself to slapping on a a book plate. But I think if I could get it in such a way that it's archival, then it would ease my mind a little bit more. And the last question, Jason asks, are you a wizard? I'm not sure what you're asking there, Jason, so for the best things, let's just move on, okay? Michael Moore, his question is, he says, onwards and upwards, here's to the next 300 well-deserved numbers. Thank you, Michael. And quick question for your forthcoming session. Do you listen to audiobooks? Kind regards. I do occasionally. Most audiobooks I've listened to, I can't stand the reader. Because in my mind, I need to hear and create it myself, and that's what reading is. Listening to an audiobook is not reading. It's another activity, which is perfectly valid and great, because I will listen to some, and I really like Hugh Fraser doing the Poirot ones, and I think he has a great voice for it. Martin Jarvis is fabulous for P.G. Wodehouse, and it's always fun to listen to him to do it. Christopher Timothy is also very good. He's done the James Herriot ones. Other voices that are pretty good for books is Stephen Fry. But in general, I haven't listened to any for quite a while. I do. Well, actually, no, I shouldn't say that, because occasionally I listen to little bits and snippets on BBC. They do a book at bedtime, and they do other readings, and it depends on who it is. Sometimes I will listen to those, but again, it's not reading. It's not a substitute for reading. It's something else, and that's perfectly fine. It's like I watch a film, I don't say I've read the book. It's because reading to me is an internal and it's a private thing that goes on between your ears in your head. Okay, John David has a question. Well, he's got a question here, and then he had another question on my Friday reads, so I thought I'd combine those and do those here. I hope that's okay, John. John says, I, for one, am completely unsurprised at your 200 subscriber mark. You're eminently sensible and pragmatic in the manner of your adopted country, and you talk about books most of us will never get to see. And he says, I almost never have questions for these, but I am curious as to why and how you found yourself in England, having been born in Canada. Were you running an Ocean's 11-like operation where you smuggled rare antiquarian books and you're currently on the lam? Well, thank you very much, John, for those remarks about 200. And yeah, I tried to. That's one of the reasons why I decided to start the channel, because I looked around and I thought, yeah, I am finding now booktubers that are doing nonfiction and really enjoy them, but they're not talking about the books that I have on the shelf here, and I wonder if anybody would be interested in that. It'll definitely be unique, but whether interesting is, those are very different things, but it seems that there is some interest. It's still hit or miss at times. I'll do something and hardly any comments or hardly any views on it. Fine, then, and then others seem to be doing well. So I'm enjoying it. That's the main thing. And you ask, how did I find myself in England? And whether John, there's only certain things I can talk about here. There's some that I can't, but I'll do my best to answer your question here. I did come for work, and it had books involved, and there were a few antiquarian books, and it did not turn out the way I had hoped. I think we'll leave it there. And your question on the Friday reads was, I was thinking about reading The Charterhouse of Parma later this year. What are your impressions? And that came up just for everybody who just sort of keep everybody in the flow here. I was mentioning I'm starting to read Flaubert, and that I've read Stendhal, and I read Red and the Black, and I detested it. And since then, I've not read anything else by him. But because I've had experience of going back to, especially one reader, George Orwell, and reevaluating him, and it's one of my favorite writers now. So I mentioned that I will probably revisit Stendhal. I do have another novel by him. I think it might be Charterhouse of Parma. I did try to look for it, but my fiction paperbacks are just in a total mess. They're piled up here, there, and everywhere, and behind books. It's really difficult to find anything at the moment. But I think that's what I have. And I really don't have, John, an impression at this point because I haven't read it. It is something that I will read. So if I do read that, like the way I look at it is I'll read the book that I have here of Stendhal. If it happens to be Charterhouse of Parma, fine. And if I enjoy it or think it's okay, then I probably will at some point revisit The Red and the Black. But yeah, that's basically the answer for that. And next one is Laura Wincello. Says, congrats on your milestone, Sean. Really enjoy your bookish discussions. Thank you, Laura. And she said, it's scary times right now, and I've been in dire need of distraction from the news, too. My question is there an author you can turn to who will reliably make you feel a little brighter or bring a smile? That has really always been P.G. Wodehouse for me. But lately, in the last few years, I've sort of, I've exhausted him, I think, for the moment. I need to let him rest for a little while before I go. Currently, I would think it's some essays, and there's no specific author there that I would say that does that. There's several, but also too I've been picking up, and because Wodehouse has sort of fallen to the side at the moment, I've been picking up thriller, not thriller, and definitely not thriller, mysteries and crime fiction, like revisiting Agatha Christie, and I thoroughly enjoy an author that was the early 20th century. Well, he did do thrillers. I should say that. It's I can't think of his name. He wrote over 100 books, and I sort of enjoy reading his. Edgar Wallace. It's just they're so simple, and they just sort of take me away for a few hours while I'm reading it. And I do want to get more because I only have a few, and I've sort of burnt through those very quickly. But in general, Wodehouse would be my mainstay and probably always will for the rest of my life. But at the moment, I'm letting him rest. Patrick Warrington says, congrats, Sean. Thank you. And here are the questions. What part of Canada do you come from? Well, I was born in northern Ontario on an island. It was the largest freshwater island in the world, called Manitoulin Island. And then just around 1980, I moved to Toronto. Stayed there till the end of the 80s, then moved to Kitchener-Waterloo. That's west of Toronto. And went to university there in the late 80s and for archaeology. And I stayed there until I came to England here. But yeah, it's sort of where I came from initially, like immediately coming to England was Kitchener. That's where I lived for over a decade. Actually, closer to 15 years, to be honest. Let me see here. What is your favorite area / county in England? I don't have any favorite yet because, sadly, I've been here for a long time, but my health here and there hasn't been the greatest, and now that I can afford to travel, my health and mobility sort of limits it at the moment, which is a real bummer for me, because I did started traveling around a little bit, even on limited means, but there was quite a period that I didn't, or several years that I just barely scraped by for about 5 or 6 years while I was here. I just barely, at times I couldn't even make rent or buy food at times. But anyway, so there's a lot of places I like. I have not visited Scotland. I do want to visit Scotland, and I do want to visit Ireland. When or how that's going to happen, I don't know. Any place in the British Isles you'd like to visit but never have. have been? There's too many. There's so many places that I do want to go to. I can't pick one out of a hat, and just because there's so many places. Have you visited many country churches? Yeah, I try to, and that's the one thing that I do. I do try. I don't drive though, so it makes it a little difficult to do that. But when I was traveling around, I definitely would stop off at country churches, and I do really enjoy church architecture and Gothic architecture and cathedral architecture. Are you interested in genealogy and heraldry? Yes, to a certain extent. Like genealogy for myself, occasionally I look at things, but I have not made a proper sort of sat down study of it and looked in detail. And I keep saying I'm going to do that, but I just have not got around to doing it. Heraldry. Yeah, the heraldry comes in because I get not bookmarks, book plates and stuff with heraldry, so it comes up there, so I do look into that a little bit. And last question is, what book would you like to see in Folio Society edition? Ooh. That's a difficult one, because they did do one of my favorites already, but beyond my price range. It's over £500 in the special edition. It's Gargantua and Pantagruel by Rabelais. I don't know what else off the top of my head I'd say that I would really like them to do, because they did do Les Miserables, which I really enjoy. Well, I suppose Gargantua and Pantagruel, that would be a little more reasonable priced. That's what I would say. That would be my answer to that. And moving on, Kojo Jojo. Around how many books do you have in your collection? I have under 4,000, but probably just under 4,000 here. And around how many books do you manage to read per year? That varies depending on what I'm reading. If I'm a heavy academic reading year, then the number really plummets because I do read academic histories and academic studies on books. If I read a lot of fiction, like this year is probably going to be, and last year quite was as well, and I think I don't really keep a number. I'll sporadically start a list of things, and I did at the beginning of actually I started around February, and I went to I think April, and I was reading collections of essays, academic essays, and then just reading almost a crime thriller or a mystery every evening. So I think in that period of time I did about 60 or 70 books because they were just really simple ones. So I say last year I must have read in excess of 150 books, but I don't know the exact number. And how many? Okay, what are your favorite 20th century authors? There's a few of those. I mentioned Orwell. He definitely has become one of my favorite 20th century author. P.G. Wodehouse that I mentioned. C.P. Snow. Science fiction-wise, it would be Clifford Simak, Isaac Asimov, Frank Herbert. I'm thinking of ones that I reread, and that to me is the sign of favorite. And those are the ones that just come readily off the top of my head at the moment. I can't think of anybody else. And then Nathan Fung, there's two questions because he asked one as well in the Friday Reads. But his is congratulations, Sean. Thank you. Which author or book or series got you started in book collecting? In book collecting, I've been trying to rack my brain to see what that was. I'm struggling. I'm really struggling with that. What started sort of my collecting? for that, because I sort of always remembered having books around, but I never really heavily started reading until I was in sort of my mid-late teens. It probably was yeah, it must be. It must be the classics, the Penguin classics, the Greek and Roman classics. I think that must be it, because I started buying every one that I could find and devouring them at the time. So that must be it. It's the only thing that I can think of. And then he says, and do you have a favorite genre? That does change at times, but I think at the moment my favorite genre, if it can be called a genre, is essays. I just love reading essays. Not academic essays so much, but I love reading what I call the occasional essays, like I've been doing on my the E.V. Lucas essays. And Nathan's other question is, Sean, when did you move from Canada to the UK, and was it for work or pleasure? I moved here in 2004, and it was for both work. Well, it was for work mainly, and for pleasure as well. But I wish it was more pleasure, but it's mostly work. And then David Waldrop says, congratulations. I hope you get many more subscribers. Thank you, David. And how often do you clean your bookshelves? Clean? What do you mean about that? I don't know what you mean, cleaning bookshelves. You mean dust? Dust just sits there. I clean them when I pick it up to look at it. No, I don't really clean my bookshelves regularly. I should, but I don't. And Amy from the Dusty Bookshelf, so she understands the Dusty Bookshelf. Congratulations. Thank you, Amy. And what are some of my favorite authors to read? Well, I think that sort of goes with, the 20th century ones, definitely. And I do like 19th century and French literature. Balzac, Zola, Dumas, and Flaubert now is definitely I think that's gonna be one of my favorite ones. And older French ones like Rabelais. British authors, I like Dickens. I really love Trollope. Henry James. Oh, I should have added Henry James in with the 20th century ones as well. Henry James. These are ones that I can read over and over. Joseph Conrad. Those are sort of the ones that bounce off the top of my head, and the ones that I can read over and over again eventually. Victor Hugo is another one. And Lillian Neiswender says, hi, Sean. Congratulations. Thank you, Lillian. And I'm not surprised your subscriber count is climbing. You are very knowledgeable and interesting gentleman. Well, thank you. My question is, who is your all-time favorite poet? Well, that would, I think, have to be John Clare. And I say that, and I don't even have all his poetry, because there's like a 9 to 11 volume set that Oxford put out, but I don't have that. But it would be John Clare, would be my favorite poet. Others, there's favorite sort of, but I think everything that I read of John Clare, it doesn't matter what it is, a snippet, there is something I find of interest in it. And I find his character so interesting as well. And other poets, like I like Robert Frost. I like Shelley. I like Byron. It's just, but again, with them, there are poems that I go, I could sort of live without this. But yeah, as a consistent poet, it definitely would be John Clare. And Lillian goes on to say, I agree with you, Sean. Books can help keep us sane in these very trying times. Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's because I am working from home now, and I'm not going out at all for anything. And And yeah, it's the books that are keeping me of interest here of keeping things going. And I've ordered extra ones recently because I just figured, okay, well, work has just been so mind-numbing. It's just so difficult to do because the people that I'm dealing with, that just don't have any understanding of what's going on or care. All they care about is themselves. So it's a bit draining in my mind to do that, and then to sit and read something that if it doesn't take my mind away completely, even the essay, like I put a hiatus on the E.V. Lucas essays for a little while, but I hope to get back to them in the next day or two. But I'm just reading some fiction now, and I'm just gonna sort of be a glutton there and just read a whole bunch of fiction. And I've got some of my Clifford Simax that's coming, short stories, which I'll just devour those. I love those. And I've got some Meg Ray novels by George Simenon. And yeah, so I think that's going to sort of be my gateway back into reading other stuff, I think, because I'll sort of spend my time on that and get myself lost for a little while. But no, there's the Q&A. And again, thank you everybody for asking questions, and I look forward to continuing the videos, and let's get to 500 so I can do another one. I will see you later, BookTube. Bye.